Hey, I hope you're ready for a crash course in MLA format. I'm going to try to cover everything that you need to know for our research paper that we're going to be doing when it comes to MLA format. And by the way, this is relevant if you plan to go to college, if you plan to take a KC class um, like English Comp 1 or English Comp 101 or 102. Either one of those, you're going to need to know MLA because all your papers are going to be written in that, and hopefully this can help you get ready for that. So, all right, the basics of paper formatting. We want to set up our document for success before we write a single word. Do not start just typing away. Set up your document first. All right, so first, some basic general formatting rules. The margins should be 1 inch around. Now, I realized in class that not everybody knew what a margin was. So I'm going to pull this over here. All right, so a margin is the space around where you're not typing. Right, so it's the edges, the blank space, the side here, and the top and the bottom. With MLA, your margins need to be 1 inch on all sides, 1 inch. Do not use 1.25. That's the default in Word. Most of you won't be using Word though. You'll be using Google Docs, and they already have that set at 1 inch on your margins. Let me see. I'll just show you the margins here. On the margins, if you go to File and then down to Page Setup, you can see, or scroll down, this shows you what your margins are. By default, they are already set up at 1 inch. You don't have to change anything. On the other hand, now we come to font. Now, the MLA handbook does not specify that you have to use a certain font. In fact, it just says that you need to use something readable, and it gives a range between a certain size and another certain size. But if your professor taking a class requires or specifies something, then that takes precedence over what the handbook says. So I am going to be your professor, and I am specifying 12 point Times New Roman font. That's normal. That's what most people use for academic writing, things like that. So we're going to stick with that and keep it kind of uniform across the board. So, and that keeps you from having to make any choices. All right, and then also spacing. Spacing, it is double spaced throughout the entire paper. There are no triple spaces throughout the entire paper. There is one exception when you come to block quotes. The block quotes um, uh, will be single spaced, but everything else will be double spaced. Okay. All right, so now the first thing you do on your page, you need your name, your instructor's name, the course number, and the date. And let me go ahead and let's set this up. And I'll go ahead. Let's say I'm going to say John Smith is the student, and you know what? I might as well do the rest of this stuff too. I'm going to make this 12-point font, and it's going to be Times New Roman, and hit this 3 dots there, and I'll make this double space there. Everything's kind of looking like it should. Now, hit the space bar 1 time, and then you put your teacher's name. For this class, that will be, well, you can put Mr. File. And then you hit the space bar again, and you put your class name. So for this class, it will be English 2. And finally, you put the date. And the date, we're going to get to that, but, well, actually, let me show you. In the date has to be in a certain format. Now, a lot of times we think we know how to format a date. We say today is February 20th, and then we put a comma, and then the year, 2026. But In MLA format, the order of that is changed and there is no comma. You put the day, the number at the beginning, and then followed by the month written out, and there's no comma, and then you put the year. So whenever it comes to our paper, it's going to look like, for today's date, the date I'm recording this, it's the 20th of February, 2026. There we go. All right, let's move on forward. So next we want to talk about in-text citations. Well, before we get to in-text citations, there's something that's not on my slideshow presentation, and that is page numbers. So we're already here in this document. Let's go ahead, and what we do is we double click. See my margin? You double click in the top margin. It opens up the header. Okay. You go to your three dots up here and you click this, and it should bring it over to the right side. That is what you need to do. And then there are two different ways. You can hit format and then page numbers, and it will bring up this little thing. You want to just hit apply. But the other way to do that, which is easier, since you've already got this open, just hit options, page numbers, and it brings up the exact same thing from the other one. Hit apply, it pulls in your page number. Now, what you want to notice is this is 11-point font and it's Arial. When you change the font from down here, it didn't automatically change the font from the header. So you want to make that Times New Roman 12-point font. And in front of that page number, you want your last name. So I think I had John Smith up there, so Smith, and a space between the last name and your page number. That is what you got. Okay. We can come back to that in a minute. So, okay, now we're coming to this in-text citations. When do you need an in-text citation? You are giving credit to the person who came up with the ideas you were writing. Not just the words, but also the ideas. It's plagiarism if you take somebody's idea, not just the words, their idea, and you try to pass that off as your own. So, you of course have to use an in-text citation when you are making a direct quote, that is, taking the exact words from somebody. But you also need to use an in-text citation if you paraphrase it. If you put it in your own words, but it's their idea, you still cite it. If you summarize what the source says, you still need to cite it. Okay, just make sure you cite. You can't do it. You can't overdo it. If you think it might come from somewhere else besides between your two ears and your brain, then you need to cite where you got it from. Okay, so as a general rule, MLA uses parenthetical citations. The goal is to point the reader to the corresponding entry in the works cited list. Include the author's last name and the page number. There is no comma in between the name and the page. And then you place the period after the parentheses. Okay, let's take a look at this. The normal way you might do it, you might have a sentence that says, romantic poetry often characterized nature as a healing force. Then we have in parentheses, Wordsworth, that's the name of the author, 23, that's the page it falls on. Close the parentheses, and the period comes outside of the parentheses, after it. All right, another way you can do this, if you use the name of the author in the sentence, say, Wordsworth argues that nature acts as a healing force. When you use the author's name in the sentence, you don't have to put the author's name again, you don't have to repeat yourself in the citation. Instead, you just put the page number. Hopefully that's helpful. Some common problems with that. What if the source you have doesn't have an author listed? So instead, you use a shortened form of the title. For example, right over here. All right, and then you've got, what if there's two authors? You list both last names and separated by the word and. There's an example of what that looks like. And if you have three authors, you list the first author's last name, followed by et al. Now what is et al? Et al is a Latin term. It's actually an abbreviation. which means and others. So Frank and others. And then what happens if there's no page? Why would you not have a page number? Well, websites would not have a page number. Thankfully, the project we're doing, you don't have to worry about this because I provide all your sources for you, and I provided sources that all have page numbers. But in the event that in the future you run into one where it doesn't have a page number, then you just use the author's name. You often find this with websites. Next, block quotes. How about a block quote? When you have a block quote, when do you use a block quote? You use a block quote whenever you have a quotation that you are taking from somewhere else that when you're typing it out, it is more than 4 lines. Once you go into that 5th line, it's too long to be in just a regular in-text quotation. So we make what's called a block quote. Now what does that look like? Well, here's an explanation. You start a new line. You stop right where you're at. You start a new line. Indent the entire quote from the left. You do not use quotation marks whenever you're using a block quote. And then you place the parenthetical citation after the final punctuation mark. That's different. Normally we put the parenthetical citation inside with the period following the parentheses. On a block quote, that's different. Now, again, what does a block quote look like? I happen to have a picture that I got off of Google. Let me see here. Right, this is not the best picture. It is very blurry, but hopefully you can see it. You've got the regular text here going all the way to the side. Then you start a new line. You have this text in here that is indented to a half inch over here. And if you notice the parenthetical reference here doesn't have a period after it because it comes over here. Then you come back to the regular text over here. I don't think that's the best example, but it's the one I found quickly. Maybe I'll look for a better example and show you later. Okay. Now, works cited page, a complete list of sources at the end of your paper. Before we start the works cited page, I want to remind us of the title. So when you're dealing with the title, let me see here. So we are back here on the example page that I was setting up. When you're doing a title, you don't have to put any extra spaces in. Just center it after hitting enter after the date. Put your title in here. I'm just putting title goes here as a place marker. You want to make sure you capitalize the correct words and everything, but that's where your title would go. Then you come down one line and you go back over to the side. You indent your first paragraph and you start typing. 7 years ago. Okay, that's it. All right, back to the PowerPoint. So, a works cited. What is a works cited? It is a complete list of sources at the end of your paper. Sometime, maybe you'll have to do a bibliography someday, and here we're talking about works cited. What's the difference between a bibliography and a works cited? Glad you asked. A bibliography includes every single source that you found that deals with the topic. Every single source, whether you put it in your paper or not, anything you read or got ideas from, anything that influenced you in any way at all, you need to put that in your bibliography. But we don't do bibliographies here. We're doing a works cited, which means it's just a list of the things you use in your paper that you actually cite. So, page setup. When we do the page setup, we just the same as the regular title of the page. We're not going to have any bold, italics, or quotes. None of that. It's just centered at the top of the page. We start a brand new page with this. We don't go on the bottom of a page we've already started typing on, but we start a brand new page. And then every entry in your works cited, every source that you have, is going to have a hanging indent. Now, basically what that is, it's the opposite of a regular paragraph's indentation. You know, in a regular paragraph, we indent the first line, and the rest of it all hangs out flush to the left. In a hanging indent, you have the first line flush to the left, and everything after that ends up being indented by a half inch. And then what order do you put your sources in? Well, you put them in alphabetical order, arranged by the last name of the author. Okay, this is what goes into your sources when you're citing them in your works cited list. You got the author, last name first, and then comma, and then first name. You got the title of your source. So if it's an article, you have it in quotation marks. If it's a book or some other long work, then you have it in italics. The title of the container, whether that's a journal, a website, or an anthology. And then you have your other stuff over here. No, let's move on. Now, here's an example of a book citation. We've got James Gleick with the last name first, and then we put a period after it. That's the way it's going to look. Then we have a title in italics, the book title, and we have a period, and we're listed the publisher, comma, and the publication date, period. And that's pretty much it. And here's an example for a website. Again, you've got the author first. You've got the title. It's an article. It's not a book length, so it's in quotation marks instead of italics. We've got the container is the website, so it's in italics, and then we have the date, and we have the website URL address, not including the HTTP information. So, all right, that's it for this presentation. There is more to know, and I am going to share with everyone a copy of the MLA handbook so that if there's any questions, you can find it in there. And I'm sure that as we go, there will be more things I share in class, but this just gets us started. Hopefully this is helpful, and we already went over this in class, but I'm recording this for those of you who could not make it to class today. Have a good weekend. Have a good day. If you're watching this and you don't even know me, I hope that you find it helpful.